An Israeli airstrike killed 2 Palestinians in the city of Tulkarm on Monday as Israel continues its occupation in the West Bank. Palestinian authorities said that the 2 killed on Monday were members of its armed wing. Witnesses in the city said a raid was underway, but there was no immediate comment from the Israeli military. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed that 2 people had been killed, without identifying them. Footage from the scene showed firefighters spraying the burnt-out remnants of the vehicle as a large crowd gathered around. In Jenin, further north, a major operation with hundreds of Israeli troops backed by armored vehicles, drones and helicopters looks set to go into a second week, with smoke rising above the refugee camp adjacent to the city, a long-time center of armed militant groups. This footage shows thousands of Palestinians fleeing towards the south of Gaza from the north in November 2023, seeking refuge from Israeli airstrikes and fierce ground fighting. Most fled on foot, carrying their belongings in bags and bedding across their backs. More than a year later, tens of thousands of Palestinians streamed along the main roads leading back north on Monday, after Israeli forces began to withdraw from a main corridor across the enclave. Crowds of people, some holding infants, others holding animals, headed north on foot along a road running by the Mediterranean seashore.
عشنا احنا نفس اللي عاشته، يعني هي برضو عاشت التجويع، يعني هم بيقولوا برا حقوق الحيوان، ما شفناش لا حقوق انسان ولا حيوان هنا. البس هذا يعني ما كناش نلاقي شيء نطعميه، بنحط له من اللي احنا بناكله وكلها معلبات، وهو ما كانش متعود على الاشياء هاي برضه. وحاولنا بكل الطرق انه يضل معانا، كان كثير يشرد لانه كان طول الوقت خايف، ونحاول نرجعه ونحاول نطعميه من المعلبات الموجوده اللي هو مش متقبلها. كان هو مش يتاقلم، هو زي ما تقول كان مجبور، يعني كثير كان يشرد لانه غيرنا الاماكن كذا مره، فما كانش يعرف يرجع لمكانه. بالنسبه للاكل كان كثير يعني تقعد يومين 3 ما تاكلش لانه الاكل مش مقبول بالنسبه لها، وكان يسبب لها مشاكل. يعني زينا احنا كمان كنا صعوبه ان نلاقي الاكل الصحي والطحين، الابسط من مقومات الاكل ما كناش نلاقيها.
Witnesses said the first residents arrived in Gaza City in the early morning after the first crossing point in central Gaza opened at 7 a.m. Another crossing opened around 3 hours later, letting in vehicles. Around 650,000 were displaced from northern Gaza during the war. More than 47,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli assault on Gaza, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Many of those displaced have had to move several times as Israel designated parts of Gaza as humanitarian zones and then cleared them out before launching campaigns there.
Holocaust survivor Eva Sapasi has a warning for the world. Don't let history repeat itself. Asked about how she views rising anti-Semitism and right-wing populism, she said,
It is terrifying. It is definitely terrifying that it is like this, and that is why we have to do something about it in the very beginning. Because the Shoah did not begin with Auschwitz, but with words, silence, and society looking away. And every single person should do something to ensure that something like this never happens again.
The 92-year-old survived Auschwitz, the Nazi death camp liberated 80 years ago by Soviet troops. She's among a group of survivors voicing concerns about the current political climate. During a visit to the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt, Germany, she recalled being a young girl and on the brink of death at Auschwitz. She said prison guards mistakenly thought she was dead already and left her behind. She did not speak about her experience for decades. In 2016, she discovered a death list containing the names of her mother and brother.
And then I was able to grieve, to cry. I couldn't do that before.
96-year-old Teresa Regula was also brought to Auschwitz. It's difficult to make out the numbers the Nazis tattooed on Regula's arm, but they're fresh in her mind. 22-0-11, she said. Once a healthy child, she contracted chickenpox, measles, and scarlet fever in the camp. The thought of reuniting with her father kept her alive. Those dreams were dashed when she later found out he had been mistakenly shot by Russian forces when they liberated the concentration camp he was in. Speaking at her home in Krakow, Poland, she says terrible things are happening in the world. People didn't draw any conclusions, she said, adding she chose not to have children so they wouldn't have to go through anything like what she suffered. Janina Iwanska, a Polish Catholic woman sent to Auschwitz at almost the same time as Regula in 1944, also remained childless. She's worried about the generations of children to come.
What will their future be like? Because I see it as bleak, because I remember before 1939, hatred was created between people, pitting some people against others, treating others as a slightly lower, worse race. And what came of it? But what is now is still on a much, much larger scale.
7. London schools, community centres and mosques in East and South London have been vandalised with anti-Muslim graffiti this month. Police are investigating whether the incidents, which took place between January 6th and January 23rd, are linked. Officers are treating the vandalism, which included Islamophobic messages, as hate crimes. Among the locations hit by vandals were Leighton Jamiah Masjid and Stratford Mosque, both in East London. A mosque in West Norwood in South London was also among the targets. The Stratford Islamic Association said the vandalism is not an act of faith, it's an act of cowardice.
I came 5:30 in the morning. As soon as I park my car and come outside of the car, as I seen the gravity, I was shocked, completely shocked. Not only shocked, I was scared. So immediately I opened the door and came inside the masjid, locked the masjid, and then I prayed 2 rakat namaz, and then I contacted police officer. At 9:45, with the 3 big vans and all the team, constantly they are working with us and constantly they are contacting us, and routine they are going every hour.
Police said they were also investigating reports the attacks were being led by an anti-Muslim online group, reportedly offering £100 in exchange for the vandalism. Newly elected Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain visited the communities impacted by these attacks and reassured the Muslims in the area.
It's sad to see that there are people out there who feel that Muslims are the enemy and that our places of worship or Muslim people are worthy of being targets. But the main message I want to give, which is something I think the mosque itself is saying, is that we mustn't try to go in one extreme or the other. We shouldn't try to fight fire with fire. We always will be better off fighting fire with water. So let's not get despondent and let's not get angry. Let's get organized, inshallah. As a community, when we see these acts, we get very upset. But let's use that energy to get organized, inshallah, so that we can reach out to the vast majority of people in this country who are fair and reasonable and who have no hatred for other religions or other ethnicities.
The U.S. and Colombia pulled back from the brink of a trade war on Sunday. U.S. President Donald Trump had threatened tariffs and sanctions on Colombia for refusing to accept military flights carrying deportees as part of his sweeping immigration crackdown. But late on Sunday, the White House said Colombia had agreed to accept the migrants after all, and Washington would not impose those penalties. Colombian Foreign Minister Luis Gilberto Murillo on Sunday said his country's government had, quote, gotten over its impasse with Washington. Earlier, Colombia's President Gustavo Petro had condemned the military deportation flights and said that he would never carry out a raid to return handcuffed Americans to the U.S. However, he also said that Colombia would welcome home deported migrants on civilian planes and offered his presidential plane to facilitate their, quote, dignified return. The Colombian statement did not specify whether the agreement it had struck with the U.S. included military flights, but it did not contradict the White House announcement. It added that Murillo and Colombia's ambassador to the United States will travel to Washington in coming days for follow-up meetings. The use of U.S. military aircraft to carry out deportation flights is unusual. Some of them carried out 2 flights to Guatemala on Friday, while Mexico also refused a request last week to let a U.S. military aircraft land with migrants. Trump has said he is thinking about imposing 25% duties on imports from Canada and Mexico on February 1st to force further action against illegal immigrants and fentanyl flowing into the U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday signed an executive order establishing a review council to evaluate the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Trump called on the council to hold its first public meeting within 90 days and submit a report to him within 180 days of the first meeting. Trump raised the idea of overhauling or shuttering FEMA last week during a trip to disaster areas in North Carolina and California. The Republican president accused FEMA of bungling emergency relief efforts there. He said he preferred that U.S. states be given federal money to handle disasters themselves. Trump said in his executive order that there were, quote, serious concerns of political bias at FEMA. He added that agency funds had been used for programs related to incoming migrants. FEMA brings in emergency personnel, supplies, and equipment to help areas begin to recover from natural disasters. Funding for the agency has soared in recent years as extreme weather events have increased the demand for its services. The agency in the past year has battled misinformation, including about disaster responses in Florida and North Carolina. Acting FEMA head Cam Hamilton wrote to staff on Friday, reassuring them that the agency's continued existence was vital to the country's disaster response efforts.
Rwandan-backed rebels marched into Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's largest city on Monday, according to witnesses. That's prompted thousands of people, including Congolese soldiers, to flee across the border into Rwanda. The advance by the rebel alliance, spearheaded by the Tutsi-led M23 militia, is the latest escalation in decades of conflict. And that's in a region already suffering one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Corneille Nangaa, leader of the Congo River Alliance that includes the M23, said his forces were in control of Goma, though that could not be independently confirmed. Gunfire rang out near the airport, city centre and border with Rwanda, with 2 Goma residents reporting ongoing clashes between government-aligned militia and M23 fighters. Uruguay's military said 100 Congolese soldiers had handed weapons to them at the UN peacekeeping mission in Congo as requested by the rebels. Additionally, 2 United Nations sources said Congolese and Rwandan soldiers had fired at each other across the border. There was no immediate comment from Congo's government or military. Congo's eastern borderlands are a tinderbox of rebel and militia fiefdoms. They stem from 2 regional wars after Rwanda's 1994 genocide, when Hutu extremists murdered close to 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The M23, the latest in a long line of Tutsi-led rebel movements backed by Rwanda, previously captured Goma in 2012. However, it withdrew days later after an agreement brokered by neighboring nations. M23's defeat the next year was followed by a deal calling for its demobilization. But M23 never fully disarmed and launched a fresh offensive in 2022. It captured vast swathes of the mineral-rich North Kivu province, forcing hundreds of thousands from their homes. M23 is well-trained and professionally armed, and it says it exists to protect Congo's Tutsi population from the Congolese government and ethnic Hutu militias. UN experts say Rwanda has supported M23 with 3,000 to 4,000 troops, as well as providing significant firepower.
Reiterate in unequivocal terms.
The UN Security Council held crisis talks on Sunday with the United States, France and Britain, condemning what they said was Rwanda's backing of the rebel advance. Rwanda dismissed statements that, quote, did not provide any solutions.
Mr. President,
it accused the Congolese government of sabotaging negotiations with M23 and supporting Hutu militiamen linked to the 1994 genocide. Congo rejects these allegations.
The Muslim Council of Britain has entered a new chapter with the election of Dr Wajid Akhter as its Secretary General. With a clear vision for the future, he has pledged to reform the organisation and guide British Muslim communities toward unity, empowerment and progress. Acknowledging the changes in society since the Council's founding in 1997, Dr. Akhter has outlined an ambitious plan, focusing on renewal and adaptability. His goal is to ensure the Muslim Council remains a driving force for positive change, serving not just the Muslim community, but the wider British society. Joining him is Masoud Ahmed as Deputy Secretary General. With decades of experience in community leadership, he will play a key role in driving the organisation forward. This transition comes as Zahra Mohammed, the first female Secretary General, concludes her tenure. The Muslim Council of Britain is poised for transformation. With new leadership at the helm, the organisation is ready to embrace the future with boldness, innovation, and a renewed commitment to serve.
Sweden's authorities have seized a ship in connection with the latest incident of undersea cable damage in the Baltic Sea. That's according to the country's security police on Monday. The cable between Sweden and Latvia was compromised early Sunday, which Latvia said was likely a result of external influence. This damage caused Sweden to launch a sabotage probe and prompted NATO to deploy patrol ships to the area. Marine traffic data showed a Coast Guard vessel escorting the Vesion bulk carrier to Swedish waters. The vessel, part of a Bulgarian shipping company, had passed the fibre optic cable in the early hours of Sunday. The ship's owner said it may have struck the cable after dropping its anchor, but there was no malicious intent. NATO has ramped up its presence in the Baltic Sea after a string of critical cables have been damaged in the wake of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The alliance said it will take action against ships suspected of posing a security threat to undersea infrastructure. The Latvian Navy said on Sunday that 3 ships were subject to investigation.
Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenka extended his 31-year rule with a massive election win. The country held a presidential election on Sunday. According to results published on the Central Election Commission's Telegram account, Lukashenka took 86.8% of the vote. Western governments have rejected the election as a sham. European politicians said the vote was neither free nor fair because independent media are banned in the former Soviet state, and all leading opposition figures have been sent to penal colonies or forced to flee abroad. Lukashenka, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, has said that he doesn't care whether the West recognized the election.
Some chose jail, some chose exile, as you say. We did not expel anyone from the country, and moreover, we opened the country.
Belarusian officials said turnout was 85.7% in the election, in which 6.9 million people were eligible to vote. Poland's foreign minister expressed mock surprise in a post on X that only 87.6% of the projected vote appeared to back Lukashenka, questioning if the rest could fit inside the prisons. On the streets of Minsk ahead of the elections, voters appeared to suggest that they thought the results were already set.
Same as before, same as it always went. What's there to think about?
You don't need to think twice about it.
It will all go. I don't know the exact percentage, but everyone knows the result. Everyone has a clue. That's it.
The EU and the US have said they do not acknowledge Lukashenka as the legitimate leader of Belarus after he used security forces to crush mass protests following the last election in 2020. This election, Lukashenka faced no serious challenge from the 4 other candidates on the ballot. While the outcome was never in doubt, he faces difficult choices in his next term as he navigates relations with Russia and the West, against the background of possible talks to end the conflict in Ukraine.
South Korea has released the initial findings of a probe into the crash of a Jeju air flight last month, but mysteries remain. All 175 passengers and 4 of 6 crew were killed in the incident, making it the worst ever air crash on South Korean soil. Now investigators say they have found duck remains in both engines of the Boeing 737-800. They also confirm that the pilots reported a bird strike. but it's still unclear why the plane landed with its wheels up. It's also a mystery why voice and data recorders, the so-called black boxes, both failed just before pilots declared an emergency. At the moment they failed, data showed the plane was still flying. Investigators are also probing the role played by airport structures. After it touched down, the airliner ploughed into an embankment built around navigation equipment at Muan Airport. Critics have said the structure contributed to the high death toll and should not have been located in line with the runway. The International Civil Aviation Organization, a UN agency, requires accident investigators to submit a preliminary report within 30 days. It then encourages them to produce a final report within 12 months. South Korean investigators have promised an all-out effort to determine the full causes of the crash.
A large artwork depicting the sun has gone on display in London, adding a new light in an elaborate hall dubbed by some as the Sistine Chapel of the UK. Helios is the latest piece of artwork by British artist Luke Jerram, adding new light to the painted hall. Measuring 7 meters, 23 feet in diameter, the Helios installation is internally lit and on show amid the Baroque interior of the painted hall at the Old Royal Naval College in Greenwich.
I saw that there was a similar one previously, I think it was a moon. We didn't make that one, and I was like, I really want to go. And I've wanted to come to see the painted hall for so long. It's been on my long to-do list for a very long time. So yeah, today we decided to come together. I also go out on a lot of adventures with my daughter, so we thought this would be a nice one to come and see together.
It's a much quieter, sort of reflective installation, because it's the sun, it's the warmer colours, and also it's because it's got the actual colours around the ceiling, etc. And I try to come in the morning when it's quieter, because then you can hear the music and you don't hear all the other sounds or background sounds as well.
Jerram, who last year had a similar Mars installation on show in the same location, referred to photographs taken between 2018 and 2024, as well as NASA observations of the Sun to make Helios, which also features a soundscape. At a scale of 1 to 200 million, every centimetre of the 7-metre internally lit installation represents 200 kilometres of the Sun's fiery expanse. The artwork contrasts with the painted hall, decorated with the intricate work of British artist James Thornhill, which he began in 1707 and finished in 1726, and which depicts English naval prowess, monarchs and mythological figures,